Hello, I'm Anita, founder of Anita's List and host of the Anita's List podcast. Over the last 20 years, I've helped more than 12,000 first-time parents choose all their baby kit and prepare for parenthood both practically and emotionally. I'm delighted to welcome the inimitable Louise, founder of Cocoon Maternity Services. A client of mine over 20 years ago, when her daughter Lila was born, Louise is now very much a part of the Anita's List family. Louise shares her own experience with postpartum depression with such vulnerability and openness. Her insights, learnings, and advice are pure gold. We chat about all things new motherhood, with a focus on how best to prepare for and look after yourself in those early months, what different types of support are available for new parents today, and that it's okay to do things your way, regardless of whatever anyone else is doing or what you think may be expected of you. I so hope you enjoy our conversation and find it helpful too. Louise Moxon. Oh my gosh, my friend. I can't believe it's been 20 years since you came into the showroom.
Yes.
As a client.
I know. Almost to the day. So I just, all I remember is you were my only preparation I did prior to having a baby. I came into your amazing showroom at that time and saw all the wonderful things that you recommended, and you took me through every step, what I needed in my hospital bag, what I needed after I'd had the baby. But what was even more, I think, invaluable is your experience. I learned so much. I learned how to swaddle a baby. I mean, I didn't even know that was such a thing at that time. I had no idea. I'd never done an antenatal class. So you were my antenatal class all in one.
I remember, do you know what? Thank you for that. That's so nice of you to say that. I remember vividly you coming in, because you sort of, you came in with such a flourish, as only you can do. And I think you were working extremely hard at the time. You had your own business and it was really full on, hence not having the time to have an antenatal class moment.
Yes.
So you came in for those couple of few hours. I think we were probably together for 2 or 3 hours.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Isn't it extraordinary how the passing of time, some things we forget. Like
Yeah.
I forget what I put in the next door room 5 minutes ago. But speaking to you 20 years ago is as clear as day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just remember thinking, I remember coming in at 7 o'clock in the evening with my husband and you sitting us both down and explaining how it all worked. And I just remember walking out of there thinking, my gosh, I actually now am quite excited about having a baby.
Yeah, so interesting. Isn't it interesting? Because I think a lot of people, when they're first time pregnant, we almost can't quite get our head around it because it's so enormous, the idea that we're making an actual human. But the fact that we are going to be blessed enough to be parents is such a big thing. I know I certainly didn't quite believe it till Mia was actually born. So you were almost quite sort of hunched. I know people physically when they come into the showroom are just are quite hunched. The shoulders are high and it's quite stressful, quite overwhelmed. Not quite sure I really want to be here anyway. And then actually as the time progresses and you learn a little bit more about the kit and actually it's all okay. It's that feeling exactly of, oh, I am actually pregnant. This is actually quite fun. And then you had an extraordinary experience, didn't you, when Lila was born?
Yes. I mean, it wasn't the smoothest transition. I think I was the first of all my group of friends to have a baby. I finished work on a Friday and I was induced on the Monday. So there was not a huge, great preparation for this. And, everything in hindsight, I wish I had been a lot more prepared and done antenatal classes like there are on offer today. But as I said, you were instrumental in that preparation time. But I remember, feeling ecstatic that, I'd had a wonderful, healthy baby. It was a natural birth. But the months and weeks to follow weren't the easiest. I think I'd come from quite a high-powered job, and suddenly the pace of life was much slower. The sleep deprivation, nobody tells you really that on day 3 you're going to be slightly hysterical when your milk comes in. I thought that was an instant thing as well. I remember, actually you telling me that I needed a breast pump. And even then I thought, well, surely if I've got two breasts, why would I need a breast pump? So, those little details, and actually it was amazing to have that, because actually it was one of my most used items.
I mean, so glamorous.
I know, so glamorous.
But actually, when you need it, and that's
You
the
really
thing.
need it.
It is quite an extraordinary shopping moment, isn't it? Because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I remember your look of horror actually when we talked about breast pumps. Really?
Yeah, really?
But it's one of those things you actually want to have in advance, because you don't know if you really need it. Because sometimes you have loads of milk, but you and the baby just don't connect for whatever reason.
100%.
And so a breast pump is going to be the magic answer. And you can therefore breastfeed your baby, giving your breast milk via a bottle, but you have a solution there.
Exactly.
Which is amazing, isn't it?
And it was also a brilliant way of allowing, my husband to get involved and give one of those feeds. And actually, I was one of those unfortunate people that only had one breast that worked really efficiently and the other one didn't. So actually having a breast pump and a dual breast pump was amazing. And you were the one that said, go for a dual breast pump, because it's twice as efficient rather than going for a single one. And so all of your advice really stood me in good stead.
Yeah, thank you. And you never know. You literally never know when you need it. And so it's almost for planning for the worst case.
Yeah.
Without getting too much. Like a breast pump in particular, I feel really strongly about a breast pump actually.
Yeah.
Because if you get it before the baby is born and you don't open it, you can still return it, because a lot of places have 90 days. We have, I think, an unlimited returns policy on breast pumps, just because, it's something that you do. It's an expensive piece of kit, but when you need it, you really
need it, actually. And, I did actually end up lending it to other friends. And, it became one of the most useful pieces of kit that I had.
Yeah. And the glamorous knickers, sanitary towels, all of those. Yeah.
I mean, they were wonderful. But actually, every single thing I used, and, used when I even had a second baby.
How brilliant. Love that. So it was quite a big shopping trip, because it's quite scary because it's all in one go.
I kept the list.
But you did keep it, didn't you? And you reused everything.
Yeah. I kept your list, and I put it in my daughter's baby book so that we could keep a record of all the things that we bought for her.
That's so lovely. I've never heard of anyone keeping this. Do you know what? Soon I'm going to be looking after the children of our clients.
Yeah.
Rather amazingly. That's quite a scary thought.
Let's
Please not too soon.
I don't fancy myself yet being a grandmother.
No, please not. Some people have used that word and my name in the same sentence already. And I was like, please not yet. But Mira and Poppy have promised they're not in that department anytime soon. So that's excellent.
Good.
And then did you find, because the months were hard, and do you think that was partly because of your almost rush into parenthood without thinking about it too much, or do you think it was to do with the support and help you had around you at the beginning?
I think that I didn't prepare enough, number one. I think I went back to a full-time job when Lila was just 3 months. I was definitely felt the financial pressures of having a dual income that I thought was really important to go back to work and earn that money. And to be honest, I wasn't ready. And I guess that is my biggest advice, is that no one is the same. Don't ever rush this process. It's a once in a lifetime thing. And actually, if it takes 6 months, then so be it, because you'll never ever get those months back again. And in hindsight, I wish I had taken note of that, but I didn't know.
And no one around you was actually helping you make that decision.
No one was guiding me. And I guess I went back, and then, coupled with the fact that you get this terrible mum guilt. I used to think, oh my gosh, what's she doing now? Whilst I'm at work, is she getting enough food? What will my night be like if, when she having a bath? I used to make the nanny keep a diary so that I could see exactly what happened in the day. And that just sort of went on like that for about 6 weeks, until this terrible anxiety that overtook my body, really. I wasn't the person I was. I just, I found it very hard to even leave the house. I hated being on my own. I felt this total despair, really. And I think it was then that I reached out to my family and said, this isn't me. And they said, we need to get help, because I think what you're experiencing is some form of generalized anxiety or depression, or I don't know. But there was such a taboo around the idea, how could I be depressed? I'm always happy. I'm always a positive person. How could this be happening to somebody like me? But actually, the more now I know about it, I am exactly the sort of person that it might happen to.
But Louise, how amazing that you actually had the self-awareness to ask for help, because I think probably so many people don't.
Yeah.
Or it's much easier now. So don't forget, this was 20 years ago.
Yes, exactly.
We didn't have mobile phones in the same way. There was not the internet in the same way. People were definitely not talking about postnatal depression, let alone depression. And so we know a little bit more about the signs and the triggers.
Exactly,
I guess.
exactly.
But how incredible. And your family were really supportive.
My family were amazing. My parents were amazing. And they really, everybody sort of came together and helped me get back on my feet. And I think it was then, during that time, when I suffered, when it was diagnosed, that I concluded that I really should now just step away from my work and focus on myself and being a mother and getting myself well, for the sake of my family.
It's quite scary how quickly it came upon you.
Yeah.
It was probably building for a while, and anyone who really knew might have seen it coming.
Yes.
But from your side, it was quite a sudden
It
physical...
did feel like that.
It sort of manifested physically.
Yeah.
As well, didn't it?
Yeah, I properly felt like my body was shaking all the time. I felt like when somebody was talking to me that I wasn't present. It was sort of going at the back of my mind. I mean, it's a really scary place to be in, because you think, am I ever going to be normal? Am I ever going to be normal? Am I ever going to feel, myself again? And actually, when you start to get those good moments, and they do become like moments, and then those moments become hours and days, and you start to see. I just remember taking a walk and appreciating everything around me, and I thought, okay, I'm starting to feel, better. But that took weeks.
How extraordinary. And were you seeing in colour, or were you seeing in black and white and grey?
I definitely at the beginning, I saw it was a dark place. And then as I got better, yeah, that you start to really appreciate the smallest of things, of being able to do the smallest of things. Because before that, I found everything overwhelming. I mean, the thought of doing a supermarket shop and taking my baby into a supermarket shop and her possibly screaming or crying, how would I cope in that situation? Well, I just avoided it.
And how did you find the medical help?
My parents had a really good private GP. So I was very fortunate enough that they had it was a friend, a family friend, and he was the one that I went to see initially, and he then put me in touch with a really amazing psychiatrist who started me on medication and anti-anxiety medication. And then once I got to a place where I felt a lot better in myself, I then started cognitive behavioral therapy, which changes the mindset, which is a whole nother topic, but it definitely helped. Suddenly I got the tools to be able to deal with these feelings, and actually that then empowers you to be able to, in life, even now, I still utilize some of those techniques in your everyday life.
How amazing. And I think ultimately we never want to go through these things, but how you react to it and come from it says so much about you as a character, or any of us going through big stuff. But being able to now, all these years later,
Talk about
it is incredible, Louise. I'm so grateful to you for opening up about this, because for our listeners, I'm sure there are lots of people listening who perhaps might have some of the same feelings, say, oh, what do I do? Where do I go? Can I speak about it? Because actually we're all in this together.
Exactly.
And it's random, isn't it? It's not anything.
No.
It's just either happens or it doesn't. It's nobody's fault.
Yeah.
It just is a thing.
It is. And actually, there is no stereotypical kind of person that might or might not get it. And I guess if you've had a predisposition to depression or anxiety, then you may be more exposed to it. But I guess those sort of people will recognize it more, whereas it's much more scary for somebody who's never ever experienced anything like that to recognize it. So it manifests itself much greater in you. So
it's very much a postpartum depression in your case, would you say?
100%.
Completely linked to having a child. And it came and it went.
It went
with lots of hard work and and self-awareness. And I think everybody now who's expecting a baby is in a much better position, in that there's much more awareness, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
So that we can support. And what would your recommendation be for friends and family around someone having their first baby? Just as well, first of all, for friends and family, if they can spot some signs and support, and for a mother who's just had a baby who might be feeling not quite herself.
Yes. And I think alarm bells, the very fact if they're not calling you back, because you think, oh no, actually I can't face talking to that person. Just keep checking in with that person, keep asking them how they're feeling, getting them to talk, going out for a coffee, or doing just something nice to take their mind off it. I know that often people who wouldn't necessarily ask me loads of questions about it, they just say, shall we meet for a walk? And I think, yeah.
Was that helpful?
That was really helpful. But they would come to my house. They would collect me.
Yes.
They would take me out. It wasn't far too scary for me to go and meet them in a coffee shop. Forget it. I wouldn't have done it.
Did people bring you food?
Yes.
Is that helpful?
Yes.
Cups of
that
tea?
was really helpful, because, of course, when you're full of anxiety, the last thing in the world you feel like doing is eating. So you're losing weight because you're really in a state of anxiety. You're not sleeping very well, and you're very agitated. So actually just bringing you food, not having to think about it. I mean, I was really lucky because my husband was really good at cooking. And so he would always make sure that there was a really good evening meal that we would have together. But not everybody has that luxury. And I think it's just really important to, I think there's so much more out there now. You know, you can get deliveries, you can get, you know, packages delivered to you for
Yes, you don't need to go to the shops for anything, actually, do you?
nothing.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And sometimes that's a good thing, and actually sometimes perhaps that's not a good thing.
No, because you
can't-
might just lock yourself away and not ever go out. So it is really important, I think, and actually walking with your baby and going in the pram is the most important thing, actually. But getting outside in fresh air for your mental health is probably the best thing in the world you can do. If that's one thing advice I would give to people is keep walking.
Yes. Do you know, I'm so glad you raised that, because I always think about the pram not just as a physical piece of kit, but also it helps with mental and emotional health too. So if we
Yes.
get the pram decision right, i.e. if you're a really big walker who lives in the countryside who really wants to walk off-road, you want to have quite a robust pram. If you're living in the centre of town and you enjoy going to cafes and more urban spaces, you actually want a littler pram, which is a little bit lighter and smaller. And actually, if we get the pram right, so it gets you out in whatever circumstances you would feel comfortable to get out in, you really have to go out once a day. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And even if just going out, sitting on a park bench, watching a bit of life and then retreating back to your nest.
Oh,
is
absolutely.
huge.
And a lot of people have a dog, and it's a chance, so you're, getting out with the baby or getting out with the dog, and it just does you the world of good.
You were an early adopter bugaboo, 2004. I remember
Yeah.
it. Yes.
Navy, very smart it was.
It was called the Frog.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Cream inside in the hood.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And then 10, 15 years later, they brought back a classic edition of that very bugaboo design. But it was the OG of the bugaboo.
It was.
The golden pram. I always think the pram is like a magic pram.
Yes.
Because if that gets you out, that's one thing. So you don't necessarily always want to carry the baby, because you could have a front carrier, which is great, but sometimes you actually just want to have the baby in their pram and you separately. Because also if the baby's fallen asleep or you're walking and you need to, I don't know, the pram is important. I think you can change their nappy in there.
Exactly.
It's
And
a
I
really nice
remember
thing.
thinking that very first walk when you go out with your baby, feeling so immensely proud.
Yeah.
Wow, here I am walking outside with my baby. And yeah, and in fact, we live just off the Northcote Road, which of course is known as the Nappy Valley.
Yes. So you're not the only one.
No.
But you think you are the only one in the world to ever have had a baby.
No, and there were just loads of people. I remember looking at all their different prams and feeling very proud of mine, actually.
It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
That is an absolute moment. You're right.
Yeah.
Because it's a production to get out of the house in the first place.
Yeah.
So,
I'm collapsing it.
yes.
If you don't have a
and
very
also you had Lila was born in the winter, so
Yes.
it was harder. Mia was born in August, so it was a heat wave. So we really didn't have to put much on other than her nappy and maybe a vest. But in the middle of winter, you've got a lot of kit to put on.
Exactly.
In the first place.
But actually sort of nice blankets, and it's kind of cozy.
Yeah, really lovely. And from that time, do you remember what was the one bit of kit that you couldn't live without?
Well, actually, I mean, obviously the lovely, amazing Anita's swaddles.
Yep.
That you recommended.
Yes.
So they all had the lovely gingham around them. They were my most used item, but actually the mobile that went above the baby's cot that had little black and white circles and these very colourful frogs and things and monkeys that came down.
Tiny Love, I remember it.
Yes, exactly. And that was part of the bedtime routine. That was always her quiet time. And I remember thinking, actually, initially I thought this is quite an ugly piece of kit for the bedroom, but it was the most used item.
Mhm.
She loved it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's
Absolutely
not
loved it.
beautiful. It wasn't beautiful,
No,
but black and white is what babies see to start off with, which is why
exactly.
it was black and white on the inside, interestingly. So a baby in this room, they would absolutely love looking at the walls here because they'll
Yes,
be really fixated on the stripes,
because they don't
interestingly.
actually, I think they don't even see colour until they're about
Not for a while.
4 months or something
Not
like
for a
that,
while. And red is the first primary colour they see,
which
apparently.
which is
How someone's figures
amazing.
that out, I don't know, but yeah, it is amazing.
Yeah, and of course, again, I didn't know any of that until
Yeah.
I came to see you.
I
Because I
know.
remember thinking,
Well,
why
what?
have they got this sort of black and white sort of checked going on
Yes.
inside the mobile? And you
Yeah.
then explained
Yeah.
another one of your amazing tips.
Oh, and you don't know, you literally don't, we don't know, how are we supposed to know? Because also nowadays, even in the last 20 years, most of us are not generally living near our families.
No.
So it becomes more of a thing to have a baby because we're slightly more isolated from our family. So it's not, the wisdom isn't passed on in the same way as it used to be, I
No.
think.
And also our parents, let's
Yeah.
be honest. My mother said to me she had a wet nurse
Yes.
for a
I know.
week
Can you imagine? Yeah.
and she
So to
wasn't a
explain to our listeners what a wet nurse is, it's someone who breastfeeds another lady's baby, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah. And but that's the thing, because formula hasn't been around forever. Quite a few people are physically not able to breastfeed. So a wet nurse is culturally very acceptable in lots of cultures because that's the only way to have a baby that can't be breastfed by their own mum breastfed. So it's very logical and very practical. But in our culture, in our day and age, it just feels a little bit not
yeah.
quite right,
Yeah, that
interestingly.
you're handing your
Yeah.
most precious bundle
Mm.
to someone else
There's
to
such a
feed.
position of trust, but I think over the centuries it's been quite normal,
Yeah,
interestingly. But
absolutely.
if your mother had that's interesting, isn't it? And yet now we've done. Oh my gosh, no, we did. No,
No.
I don't think I did. And how did you find the breastfeeding?
Well,
Because with the one boob working and the one not, that was a bit of a
I mean,
thing.
it was definitely not a straightforward
Yeah.
thing. I mean, luckily I wasn't that vain
Hmm.
because we did it. There was
Hmm.
definitely a thing going on here, and but it was okay.
Hmm.
I wish somebody had said to me, "It's okay to give a
Hmm.
bottle of
Yeah.
formula."
Yeah.
Because she's really not going to suffer
Hmm.
because of it. And actually, yeah, second time round, of course, I mixed fed
Yeah.
because I had the same issues.
Yeah.
And I thought, gosh, I wish somebody
Yeah.
had told me
Yeah.
that first time round.
Isn't that interesting? So, and that was for Digby, wasn't it? So
Yeah.
I had such a difficult time with Mia breastfeeding, and in my head, I was like, I can't not because I'm going to be the most terrible mother in the whole history of mothers, and it became overriding this obsession to breastfeed, and of course, it coloured everything, because it took ages. And by the time you finished one session, which for me ended up being about an hour and a half, you sort of had to start the next one half an hour to an hour later. And it was just such a big deal. And I think I managed about 8 weeks until we
Well,
suddenly
that is
thought,
amazing.
well, I felt it wasn't though, and lived with this whole guilt of, oh my gosh, I've done badly by my child, and I feel really strong. I think it's one of the reasons that I do what I do now is exactly to your point, that if only someone had said at the time, and a lot of this difficulty of new parenthood, I think, is hinged on two things. One is if we want to breastfeed and it's difficult, that inevitably takes over because you're breastfeeding 6 to 8 times every 24
Yeah.
hours. So it's intense and it's consistent and persistent. And also not necessarily the manner of our birth, but the memory of it, interestingly.
Yes.
So I
Okay.
had a tricky birth with Poppy, but I was never frightened because I trusted the doctors and I trusted where I was. And so I skipped out of hospital. But I suspect those two things and how we give birth and if we breastfeed or not, somehow we think we're in control of both. But I
Yeah.
think the doctors don't even know how we're going to give birth till we're halfway through. So
No.
whether we have a C-section or a natural birth or we adopt a child or we go for a surrogate, we're becoming parents. That in itself is just a miraculous thing.
Yes, I know, absolutely.
Oh,
And I remember Lila was born with a with her nose really squashed. And of course, she didn't ever really move when she was in my tummy at all. I mean, every scan I was told to jump around.
Yeah.
We could never get a picture. Always
She was in
sucking
that one position.
one position, never move. Well, actually, it's not. She's not dissimilar to that now. But we always laugh about it. And every picture, she was sucking her thumb. Even then, yeah,
Really?
age
How
20,
amazing.
we still suck the thumb
How
occasionally.
amazing. Well, there are moments, aren't there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I remember she was squashed, and I said, "Oh, is that actually going to be like that forever?" And they said, "No, no, no, no. It's only because she's been squashed against your. It'll rectify itself in about 3 days." But
And it did.
yeah,
It's
it
all
did.
perfect. She's beautiful.
Yeah, it's perfect, her nose. But at first, it's one of
Yeah.
those things
But
that
it's quite a
people,
shock, isn't it? Because no
yeah,
one tells you your baby's going to come out squished, which they
and looking,
often do. Yeah.
yes. And of course, my mother didn't know either. And
Yeah.
so the first thing she said is, "Oh, it's an interesting nose."
That word, interesting. It's the
Interesting. I
best
said,
word in the English language.
I can't really see where that's come from. I know, Mum. I'm sure it'll be
Certainly
fine.
not from my side of the family, darling.
Oh, we
Oh
laugh.
my goodness me. And then, of course, the breastfeeding is really hard. And then if you don't breastfeed,
Yes.
or you do, but for a shorter time than you think is socially acceptable, I think that would be my top tip for new parents. If I was speaking
Yeah, I
today
agree.
to anybody, is it is okay. As long as your baby is fed, as long as you are well cared for, your baby is well cared for, you get through in the way that you can get through.
Exactly. And they all turn out exactly the same.
In their own timeline. That's interesting. That's another thing.
Yes.
Not to worrying about what other people or your friends, the
Yes.
babies of your friends are doing.
Yes.
Mia and Poppy didn't walk till they were really quite old.
No, and both mine too.
No. And everyone was saying, "Oh, do you think we should perhaps speak to someone about this?" No, delighted. It was, as a mum, it was great if they weren't
Yes.
walking.
Yes.
We weren't encouraging that at all. And of course, they're really good at walking now.
Yeah.
So age 22 and 25, they're brilliant at walking. So it's just everyone in their own timeline and doing their own thing.
Yeah.
I think.
And don't be afraid to ask for help, I think.
Mm.
As a new mother, you think that you should know it all. It should all come naturally to you. But actually, it's not. It doesn't necessarily.
Not necessarily. And I think that's quite a difficult thing for a pregnant person to hear is don't worry, it'll all come to you. Now it might, but it really might not. And you might not bond with your baby straight away either, because some people don't fall in
Yes.
love with their baby on day one. And that's also fine. The love grows. It all sort of works out. And I think sometimes when you're more capable, it's harder
I agree.
because a really capable person will tend to overthink things, perhaps,
Yeah.
and want to do things just perfectly. But actually, it doesn't need to be perfect. You need to be happy. Your child needs to be happy. Regular comms. And the goal, I always think, is, if when they're 20, as Lila is, and you, as you do, have an amazing relationship with your child. We're so blessed with our 4 children, aren't we?
Yeah.
That, we have lovely relationships and communications are open and, we love them, we like them too. That's the goal.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
Exactly. And nobody sort of, tells you about that. That journey, really, and it's all a work in progress, and just to understand, just go at your own speed. And you know what? If you're not ready at 3 months, just because your boss tells you that you need to go back to work at that point, if you're not ready, listen to your body.
Yeah.
And understand that, do what's best for you, because you'll never ever get that time back again.
And give yourself, I think if anyone's listening who is pregnant for the first time and they're feeling those obligations, I have to go back to work because I'm the main breadwinner or because we need the 2 incomes, everyone's squeezed at the moment with cash.
Yeah.
There are so many things you can do that will help you in the long run, help your child. And this is the one time just to really try and
Yeah.
even take the year, or set the expectations of everyone at work that you'll take the year, but it might be you're a better mum for going back at 6 months. You don't
Exactly.
know. And this is the point. You don't know when you're pregnant how you will be.
Yeah.
So don't, and sometimes there's the stress of perhaps you've got we have quite a lot of our clients at the moment whose siblings are getting married about 4 weeks after their babies are being born. And they're really
Yes.
stressed about going to their siblings' weddings, which is quite a big thing at 4 weeks.
Yes.
So, oh my
100%.
gosh. So maybe just saying right up, and it's quite a difficult thing to say, look, I might not be physically able to be there. Or if I'm coming, I'm going to come to the service, but I might just have to retreat to an Airbnb or a hotel for the afternoon because I just might not be able to do the whole party thing. And being
Exactly.
okay to step away from, be there for the important moments, but actually for your own mental and physical well-being.
I
That's
agree.
your time, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think there is such a huge thing at the moment about, maternity leave,
Mm.
and the expectations of that. And lots of people saying, well, maternity leave is like a rest.
Yeah.
It's definitely everything but a
Yeah.
rest.
Yeah.
You are needed every moment of every minute. And actually it is the hardest job.
It is the hardest job. And then you go back to work and this was, you have a nice break. No, thank you. I'm
No.
coming here for a break.
Yeah, exactly.
Frankly.
It is incredibly rewarding because you've got this little person, but it is definitely not a break.
No, it's the hardest thing I think I ever did. That first year.
Yeah.
Certainly the first 4 months of your
Yes.
first child are
100%.
extraordinarily full on and difficult and unexpectedly hard.
Yeah.
But because it's relentless. You're feeding, you're changing, you're sleeping.
And yet you feel like, what have I done all
Yeah.
day?
Yeah.
Apart from that.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons you set up Cocoon, isn't it?
100%.
So
Yeah.
tell us how that happened.
Well, I think because of my own difficulties of finding that transition from, being a working person to then being a mother and not having the right support in place, that I decided once I was well that I really wanted to do a business that was part of my life at that moment when I could be helping other friends and people possibly that I didn't know. And so that is how Cocoon came about. And I set it up in 2011 and I've been helping, new parents since then. And it's been incredibly rewarding. It has its highs, it has its lows, because like any new business, you have to put in a lot of energy. And effectively, Cocoon is my third baby. And I'm very lucky to have my own business because you can effectively choose, when you want to work and when
This
you
is
don't.
the theory, isn't it? But in fact, of course, we're working 24/7.
No, exactly. I mean, any entrepreneur will tell you that the most challenging point really is finding that work, life balance. Because in those early days, particularly, there's no one really to guide you either, because you're going at this. You've got this idea, you think it's brilliant, it comes from a real passion, and then you've got to kind of work your way around it. But I just remember finding my first, the first night nanny that came on my books was the nanny that came to help me and was Nyla's nanny.
Amazing.
And
she's still on your books, isn't she?
she is still on my books.
Yeah.
She's called Laura, and she's and I think partly because she worked for me personally, she's an easy sell.
Yes.
But she's phenomenal. She's
Yeah.
phenomenal, and she's brought lots of people to me. So I'm hugely grateful for the support that I got, but enabling me to start this business and to be able to help lots of new parents, and hopefully my journey of how not to do things and be prepared has helped other parents, have the best possible journey they can into motherhood.
It's so lovely, Louise. And I was with a gorgeous client of ours, Yevgenia, this morning. And I
Oh,
mentioned that we were on the podcast. I said, Louise is coming on the podcast. Oh my gosh, please say hello to Louise. Please say thank you, because you've placed some help for her. She's due to have
yes.
her baby in a couple of weeks' time. And she said, you've
Oh,
been absolutely incredible. And of course, now she's calm. You know, she's got all her kit. That just
yes.
arrived this morning, which is very exciting. So she's all set up kit-wise, but she's also all set up help-wise.
Yes.
You know, and it's wonderful. So her family don't live in London. They
No,
both work
exactly.
extremely hard. She's only just gone on to maternity leave today. And she's, you know, due in 2 weeks, so that the baby could come anytime. But she's feeling really supported. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? That's the essence of what
Yes,
you bring.
exactly. And they know that actually they can call me. They've got my mobile number, and I am able to answer their queries. You know, just today alone, we've had a maternity nurse who's got the flu, and this mother has said, you know, I'm desperate. I've got a 2-year-old and a newborn, and I need help. And so we've got, you know, somebody going in to help her until her maternity
Tonight,
nurse.
yeah. Well, Louise, I remember. Do you remember this? I was calling you on the 23rd of December. A few years ago, one of our wonderful clients had the same maternity nurse for her first 2 children. This was for her third. And her maternity nurse, family circumstances, it sometimes happens, couldn't come. And I called you on the
Yes.
23rd, and Christmas, this is 23rd December,
Yeah.
quite tricky.
Yes.
And I think someone started on the 24th,
Yeah.
which was a miracle.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's the difference that you bring. It's that personal touch, which
Yes.
of course is what we all need. A hug from someone who can help and support and put practical solutions in place, which is so great. What's the difference? Can you explain for our listeners the difference between a night nurse and a maternity nurse?
A night nurse is somebody who can be very flexible. So they can come in 1 night a week, or they can come in 7 nights a week. And it can change from week to week. So some people will just think, do you know what? I'm having a really hard time. I'm not feeling very well, and I just need some support. And the nights I'm really struggling with, because if I could just get a night's sleep, then the days will be much more manageable. So that's where, and often with first time mothers, when they don't know the sort of support that they need, that is a brilliant option for them, because quite often a night nanny will be able to stay extended hours. The standard hours are 9 till 7, but some nannies will come at 6 and leave at 10. So you've got quite a flexible option there, and you're not committed to doing a set number of weeks. Whereas a maternity nurse is somebody who will live with you and be a support to you and your baby. They will very much look after the family unit, and they work a 5-day week or a 6-day week. And, you know, for some parents, that can be, you know, that's quite a commitment, because you've got to stipulate exactly how many weeks you want that person for. And you don't necessarily know how many weeks, especially if it's your first baby. But I do say to parents, if you haven't got the family support and you have got a budget to pay for this, it's a bit like taking out an insurance policy, because those people, all of which I choose myself to come on our books, are wonderful, mainly very maternal people who really understand what you go through as a new parent. And they are your Google. You know, it doesn't matter what time of day when those questions come up, they're there on hand. You don't have to put into a search, my baby's suffering from this, and you get 20 million things that come up. You have got an expert on tap that you can ask exactly what's going on. And it does alleviate a lot of those anxieties, I think.
And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because when you leave the hospital, whether you're going NHS or private, you might be in there for 6 hours only.
Exactly.
Or you might be in there for a night or 2, which is still not very long. After a C-section, maybe 3 or 4 nights. But sometimes, you know, you're sent home after 6 hours of delivering your first child. So going home, I mean, I remember it
Me
like it
too.
was, yeah, you put the car seat on the floor in the living room and you look at each other and they go, okay, so now what?
Yeah. Yeah.
But as you say, is having someone there and they're all pediatrically trained. They're all quite specialist, or are they
They're not
mothers or?
necessarily nurses,
Hmm.
even though the name says that, but they are all have gone through a maternity training. And obviously, they've got a pediatric first aid and they've all had a police check and they've all been verified and interviewed and reference checked. But above all, they've got the practical experience of working in a home and understanding that you do need to be quite a discreet person.
Hmm.
You can't come in with your own views of how you want to do things because every parent will have their own views. They would have read books
Hmm.
and they will have their own opinions on how they want to do things. So it's about understanding to listen to what the parents want and being able to gently advise them. And I think that's the essence of a really good maternity nurse. And they give wonderful advice on nutrition, what helps you, with the breastfeeding, even from making biscuits to help with all of that. So, they very much are there, not just to look after the baby, but to look after you. And I think particularly if you've had a C-section, it's an invaluable service.
And this is it's a really interesting point you raise, and I think your maternity nurses, partly because they're all, you really know
Really
how
know
to
them.
vet and also how to match characters,
Yes.
because often we trust that the maternity nurse is going to be good and capable, but are they the right fit for that family? And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It's because we're dealing with people.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but the fear, I guess, and we've probably all heard the horror stories of the maternity nurse that comes in and is the very dictatorial, this is how it needs to be. And when we are a vulnerable new mom, it's quite difficult to say no because we haven't had a child before. And by definition, they've looked after more babies than we have. How can we mitigate against that? Or do you think that's just in the past? Do you think the
I
industry
really,
has changed?
I do think the industry has changed. I think definitely maternity nurses have. I often say a good maternity nurse is like a shared role with the mother.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't say, oh, I'm sorry, that's not in my job spec. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I don't empty dishwashers or,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
clean your kitchen surfaces.
Mm-hmm.
If your mum is breastfeeding
Mm-hmm.
and she might have a 2-year-old,
Yeah.
you know, then you might have to entertain that 2-year-old
Mm-hmm.
while she's breastfeeding,
Mm-hmm.
picking up a book, playing with that 2-year-old, getting your hands dirty.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a good maternity nurse in this day and age because you can't be, you can't be too proud to say that that's not in my job spec.
Because historically, it was very much the maternity nurse was the newborn,
That's it.
and that's it. Yeah. Whereas now, so would you say the gap is closing a little bit between maternity nurses and doulas, who are
Yes.
a little bit more
Yes.
of a mother's help? Yeah.
Exactly. And I would say that, I mean, yes, a doula might come in for maybe a few hours in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And she might come in and, over a lunchtime stint and just give them extra support. Whereas I suppose a maternity nurse is also there to put the baby into a really good routine,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
if you are somebody who likes things in control, a routine and structure to your day is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And that is another thing that I would say is really invaluable to
Mm-hmm.
know,
So
because
interesting. Yeah.
I
Really.
I can't do chaos,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish I could,
Yeah.
because it would make the motherhood journey much more.
Much
And I
easier.
probably would have had 5 children if I
Yeah.
had, but I can't do, and I do like a sense of calm and structure to my day, so that I can function normally.
Yeah, yeah, quite understandable. And what is the situation with sleeping? So I know that some people think a night nurse or maternity nurse stays awake all night to watch the little one, but actually they sleep, don't they, during the
Yes.
night in the room, perhaps with the baby,
Yes.
or if the parents want the baby in their room, the baby will then go into the nursery where the night nurse or maternity nurse is sleeping for feeding, etc. Otherwise, you've got a maternity nurse in your own
Yes,
bed, which is, it depends on the families and the setup and
I
the,
agree. And I think,
space.
now, because of modern technology, and you're the best person to advise on this, is that, cameras are normally always in the baby's room now.
Mhm.
And so all night nurses are used to that.
Mhm.
So I think in order to really utilize having a night nanny, the baby needs to be in with the night nanny.
Mhm.
The baby will sleep when, and the night nurse will sleep when the baby sleeps,
Mhm.
but she'll be half sleeping.
Mhm.
I say sleep, she'll be
Mhm.
awake. And then if a mother is breastfeeding, she'll bring the baby in to you. But actually, I think what a lot of new mothers don't know is actually the bit that takes the time is the winding
Mhm.
and the resettling of the
Mhm.
baby. So
Mhm.
you could feed your baby on the breast for 20 minutes. Then the night nurse will come and take that baby, your baby, away from you and resettle. And that process in itself can take up to 45 minutes.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
you, as the mother, can go
Mhm.
straight back to sleep,
Mhm.
knowing that your baby is being looked
Mhm.
after until the next feed.
Amazing. And then you can express your milk in the morning, perhaps. It stays in the fridge for
Exactly.
24 hours, doesn't it? And then
Yeah.
if the maternity nurse or your partner, I always say, if your partner can volunteer for the
Yes.
11 p.m. or the 5 a.m. feed,
Yeah.
that's very, very welcome.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
But then you get a sort of 6-ish hour stretch, which you feel like a goddess at that point.
Oh, I mean,
Yeah,
100%.
because you can't drop too many feeds in the night because your milk wants to come out, but the less you feed, the less you produce. So it's a very
Exactly.
nuanced,
So
balanced thing.
even if you're not feeding at one of those feeds, because your milk has to regulate itself, that's where, having an express machine, so you can literally just pump off
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
excess there,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and alleviate some of that
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah.
Then you can, put it into a fridge,
Mm-hmm.
into the express bottle,
Mm-hmm.
and they can give that as a top up. But
Mm-hmm.
it's never wasted.
Mm-hmm. And then you're in it together because it's quite nice having another adult who knows a bit about babies. And also, we're all quite tight on space nowadays in London,
Exactly.
certainly.
Exactly.
So a night nurse is actually quite appealing too, because you haven't got necessarily someone in your house during the day. So both options, I think. So if someone's on a budget, what would you recommend?
I think I always say to new parents, look, have a night nanny.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, have them do a trial night,
Mm-hmm.
see how you feel. So you're
Mm-hmm.
not in any
Yeah.
way committed to a
Yes.
length of time
Mm-hmm.
or a number of nights. Have one in for a trial night. I'll ring you the following day, see how it went. And I can promise you, 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh my gosh, I feel like a different person even after one night.
Yeah.
And they may only just have 2 nights a week or one
Mm-hmm.
night a week,
Mm-hmm.
but they know that that one night is their time to
Mm-hmm.
catch up on sleep. Sometimes they utilize it and go out for dinner with their other half, and knowing that they can, be asleep all night. So, it definitely has its advantages. But yes, if you're unsure the sort of support to go with, I would say the night nanny option,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
they can do extended night nanny
Mm-hmm.
hours,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be really useful.
And if family are wanting to help, perhaps instead of buying you a gift, they could buy you a night of a night nanny.
Yes, and
How amazing.
we have lots and lots of grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
because they are sort of used to having
Mm-hmm.
had the help in their day,
Mm-hmm.
be it, as we talked about, a wet nurse,
Mm-hmm.
but having that support, and they know that they can't do the nights.
Yeah.
They can't,
Yes.
for all the will in the world, as much as
Yes.
the parents want to help, they are not going to get up at the 3 a.m.
Yeah. And that's
So,
the thing. And so you raise a really good point, because sometimes there's the expectation of what do we as first time parents expect from our parents, and what are they expecting from us? And actually, it's really important to have that conversation before the baby arrives, isn't it?
yes,
Because some
exactly.
parents sort of come at lunchtime and say, well, what's for lunch? And you're like, well, I've just had a baby,
Yes.
and others are amazing without even having the conversation. They're doing the food, they're cleaning the floor, they're right in there with a practical help that we actually need. I remember I didn't want anyone else to help with the baby, but I wanted, because I was very much, I'm doing this. But actually anyone who came in and helped just with putting a wash on or bringing some food, we didn't have Deliveroo in those days, but just
No.
food. And if you trust someone enough to take your baby out for a walk in the pram, so that when they're in the pram out of the house, you can actually sleep. If they're in the sitting room and the baby's crying and you're, being gifted a couple of hours of sleep, you're never going to sleep, because
No,
you're going to be like, well,
exactly.
what's going on? Why are they crying?
I know, and people used to always say, why don't you sleep when Lila sleeps? I'm like, no, because I've got
It's
101
my time
things.
to do stuff.
Yes, I've got to do stuff. But yes, I think that's it. Having that support, and getting your other half involved, actually, and because they slightly feel redundant.
Well,
Like,
that's it.
what
So
can I do?
it's tough for them, actually, because obviously they're involved, but we go into a little love bubble with our babies.
Yes.
So what would you suggest for partners?
Well, I definitely know that, and especially in this day and age, is that they do a partners, antenatal classes, so you can actually meet other fathers in the same boat. I think that is a really good thing to be able to offer. But I think if you can get them to do one of those feeds, it's a really bonding time. And it's actually having that quiet time. And I used to go to bed at, say, 9:00, and that last feed was Simon's time, and he used to absolutely love it.
So you both loved it. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And a lot of the dads actually get up and go to work at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. So if they can do the 5 o'clock,
Yes.
either one of those are really, really helpful. And I'm not sure if you've found this in your experience, but I find that week 6 and week 10 are two of the toughest weeks.
Yes.
So in terms of getting help and when to get help, and if you're, if you don't have so much money to spend on help,
Yeah.
perhaps a tiny bit at the beginning, then perhaps a tiny bit at week 6 and week 10.
And having a sort of welcome home package, where you just have 3 intense days of a maternity nurse, an expert telling you all the different things, and then hopefully that same person coming back in 6 weeks, but offering sort of virtual support in between times. So if you come to problems, they can hopefully help resolve those. But having that person come back in 6 weeks, or they have a growth, babies have a growth spurt, week 3, week 6, week 9, so they're all different times when you might need that support. And again, it boils down to the fact, have you got much support? If you're not from the UK, for instance, then you really need to have somebody who can be that pillar of support for you.
I love that. Gosh, well, I'm not in the market for having another child, but I sort of feel like I'd like some help with one of your maternity nurses and night nurses. It'd be very lovely to be taken care of for a little bit.
I know, exactly.
Maybe we could do them for 50-something-year-olds. I think that would be a very good idea. There's another business for you.
Exactly.
And if I was to ask you to give one pearl of wisdom to anyone expecting their first baby, what would it be?
I definitely think, don't be afraid to ask for help. And although sometimes you can feel very alone, that actually, I can promise you, most people feel the way you feel. And I think just reaching out to people and getting that support is probably the most valuable piece of advice I could give.
Amazing, Louise. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me today. My gosh, I feel we could chat on for hours and hours.
I could too.
So many pearls of wisdom there. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Anita.
My absolute pleasure. Will you come back again?
I will.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please do like, share and subscribe to our Anita's List podcast show to stay up to date with our latest conversations. Together, we can all be part of the village to support new parents.